progressive era presidentes. The presidentes. These are the guys that are going to be in the driver's seat. Now, if you can visualize my room, these are the ones that are like right above the TV, kind of like in their own little nook. These are the guys that are going to change the game, and what they're going to do is they're kind of pushing back on the Gilded Age lifestyle. The Gilded Age, remember that? That's the lifestyle where it's the rich and the famous versus like everyone below. They're pushing back. They're going to give some power to the people a little bit. Also protections to the environment, which is also power to the people. Let's talk about them. There's 3 of them, okay? Numero uno. Theodore Roosevelt. Good old Teddy Roosevelt. TR. Let's talk about him. This guy, I'm telling you, he was like, I'll get to him in a second. Then you have the one, the only, William Taft, which, to be honest with you, probably one of the better progressives in the sense that he accomplished more stuff than Teddy Roosevelt, but he gets like less like respect. Like, I will tell you a fact about Taft right now. Like, I'm going to tell you a fact. I guarantee you everything else I tell you after this, you're going to forget, but you'll remember this one. Taft was only really known for being Theodore Roosevelt's, protege, but also one of the largest presidents as far as his girth. He was so big that he got stuck in a bathtub. Yeah. But we'll talk about him. I'm going to paint him in a better picture. Hopefully you remember more that he got stuck in a bathtub because he was just too big. The third one, that is Woodrow Wilson. That's going to lead us to World War I. Let's get at it, folks. Roosevelt. Okay, I could spend 2 videos talking about this guy. He's one of those presidents that just stick in your head because he has so many different sides, so many things that he did, things that you might be like, man, that's totally awesome. Other one's like, maybe. Here we go. So first things first, he's like a man's man. He's athletic. Remember, he went to the Spanish-American War. He had a cushy DC politics job. He went into the Spanish-American War, fought on the side. He was the leader of the Rough Riders. There was one time when he's doing a political speech, someone tries to shoot him. He's has in his pocket like a book or his glasses case or something. I forget what the object was, but the bullet hits that and actually goes through his speech. And then he still gives the speech. I mean, he's a tough guy. So here's what he is. He's like the first progressive president, and he has what's called the Square Deal. Know this. The Square Deal. Conservation. What does that mean? He wants to make sure we're leaving the world in a good spot for the further generations. So parks and stuff like that. Corporations being prevented from taking over, making sure they're limited in power, and it's power to the people. Consumer protections. So a few things that he did was the Pure Food and Drug Act, which we talked about before. This is making sure whatever you buy, that is going to be what's going to be in the bottle. The other thing he had was the Meat Inspection Act, which makes sure there's not a lot of rat feces in the meat that you eat, because that'd just be gross. We talked about that in the last video. Here's some of the other things that are new. The Sherman Antitrust Act. What that was, an antitrust, is basically preventing businesses from taking too much power away from the workers or people that are buying their product. The next one is the Halpern Act. Railways, they could charge a certain amount of money for people shipping stuff. What they were doing was they were increasing the prices, and they were making it so farmers weren't making any profit. They were basically working food to mouth, paycheck to paycheck, and that wasn't fair to farmers. The Halpern Act made sure that there was limits to how much you could charge people on your freight. There was an issue with coal strikes. Now, this shows you the idea that he was on the side of unions and labor. There's this giant coal strike that takes place, and he works as like the middleman between the corporation and the strikers, and they make a deal. But it shows that he's on the side of labor. On the foreign front, the Japanese and the Russians, they're fighting each other for a long time. He comes in, gets them to sit down for peace. He gets the Nobel Peace Prize. And this is the part where people are like, oh man. The Panama Canal. I'm going to give you like the rough history of the Panama Canal. So he wants to connect the Atlantic Ocean with the Pacific Ocean. But to do this, you have to dig a pretty big hole or a canal. And where they do this at is a place called, not Panama, Colombia. Basically, he goes down there and he gives money, not him personally, but through another person, gives money to revolutionaries, people who want to fight against Colombia to become their own nation. Gives them money, gives them arms, blah, blah, blah. Then, to ensure that this revolution wins, Teddy Roosevelt sends a bunch of ships down there and basically parks on the coast of Colombia like, you see our nice, big, giant steel ship? Bring it on. Well, Colombia's like, you guys can be your own nation, the nation of Panama. And the Panama people are like, yay, we're our own nation. No. What happens right after that is Teddy Roosevelt goes, you're your own nation and all, but we're going to take this huge, like, miles of land, and we're going to make ourselves a canal. Sound good? And they're like, no. And then Teddy Roosevelt goes, you see that army over there and those ships? You sure it doesn't sound good? And they're like, okay. And then we get the Panama Canal. So conservationist. So he gets 51 bird preserves, 5 game preserves, and 150 national parks. He establishes that. So he's like all over the place. Laws for the people, laws for protection, taking land to make a canal that links east to west through the Pacific and Atlantic Ocean. Teddy Roosevelt, man. First progressive president, a lot to talk about. William Taft. He's the vice president of Theodore Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt, he doesn't want to go another term. Basically, he kind of makes a promise that he's not going to, so he serves for 2 terms. But Theodore Roosevelt grooms William Taft to be the next president. He's basically training him. He's like the Robin to his Batman, okay? So he's training Robin to be like, to be the next superhero of Gotham, to be the next president of the United States. The thing is, Taft doesn't even want to be president. It's not something he enjoys. It's not something he really wants. But he does it because he's like friends with Theodore and he doesn't want to let him down. So what happens is he becomes president, and he's all about trust busting. And what I mean by that is he's taking out monopolies. He's taking out these giant corporations that are making it so they can put the price on anything that they want, and then you can't do anything about it, right? And he actually takes down more trusts, more monopolies than the trust buster Theodore Roosevelt. He takes out a lot of them. He does more progressive work in that sense than Theodore Roosevelt ever would. People don't give him a lot of credit for it, mostly because he angered people because he did these tariffs, a lot of tariffs when he was president. And people don't like tariffs because it adds prices to goods. Yeah, it's basically a tax on a good that's coming in or going out, and it raises prices. So people started not liking him for that. They didn't like him for his conservation efforts because it costs a lot of money from the public dole. So people were like, nah, we don't like that either. He does establish the Department of Labor, which basically is a lookout group that protects people within who work. He does all these great things, and then he gets to the election. There's an election that's going to take place. But the thing is, Theodore Roosevelt doesn't like what Taft is doing. He doesn't think Taft is doing enough. He doesn't think Taft is going to actually push the progressive ideology, the progressive ideals to where he wants to be pushed. He thinks he's not good enough. He's not the star player. So Theodore Roosevelt decides to run for president as a third party. And we're going to pick up that election right now. We have the election of 1912. There's going to be 4 people I'm going to talk about, which is crazy because 4 people running for the president is going to make things a little bit crazy. And it is kind of crazy because the person that wins the election only gets 41% of the popular vote. 41%. That means 59% of the American population that voted in this election did not vote for the guy, but this guy gets over 435 electoral votes, but we'll get that later. Okay, so we have the incumbent president, the president of the United States, William Howard Taft. He's a Republican. He's been there for a while. He's also best friends with Teddy Roosevelt. Oh, wait, not anymore. You see, Teddy Roosevelt's kind of tired of Taft because Taft, he stops doing the conservation, taking care of like the forest. He stops backing up the Labor Department and all these other labor unions. He's not being the progressive that Teddy Roosevelt wants. What does Teddy Roosevelt do? He's going to run for president too, under the Bull Moose Party or the Progressive Party. And here's what happens. And it happens every time in an election. I can show you so many times where this happens. It's a truism in our elections. Third-party candidates just ruin it for somebody else who's kind of like them. In this case, the third-party candidate, Theodore Roosevelt's going to ruin it for Taft. So let's get to it. Why, oh why, does the Democrat win this? Well, think the Bull Moose Party. You have Taft. You have Theodore Roosevelt running this Bull Moose Party because he gets tired of Taft's shenanigans. And then you have Eugene Debs, who's like his fourth time running for this election. Right before the election, the VP dies, which, by the way, kind of put it in the scenario. If Taft dies, we'd have the Speaker of the House as president. But let's not go into that. But VP dies. This whole election basically is Theodore Roosevelt versus Taft. They're button heads, former friends, now enemies. And because they're fighting so much, Woodrow Wilson, the non-charismatic Democrat, pulls off a landslide electoral victory. Now, people say landslide victory is too much when they don't actually mean it. The map I'm about to show you, that is what it looked like. You see a lot of blue in there, don't you? Because he owns 435 electoral votes off this. Why? Because remember how the Electoral College works. It's winner takes all in the states. And what happens is you have Theodore Roosevelt and you have Taft. Both of them are basically Republicans, but the Republican Party was split in two. The moderate Republicans went for Taft. The progressive Republicans went for Theodore Roosevelt. And because of that, the Republican vote got split in half. Let's imagine if it was just Republican versus Democrat. You almost got a perfect 50-50 split, okay? Let's say it's 48-48 with 4% of kind of independents or whatever. 48-48. So if in Illinois, 48% of the people that vote Democrat, 48% vote Republican. Let's say one of those parties get like 1% of the independents. Boom, it's 49-48. Let's say the Republicans win. Winner take all, right? That's not what happened here. What happened here was this. You have 40-something% Democrat in each state. Then you have 40% Republicans in each state. The problem is that 40% Republicans get split in half because you have Theodore Roosevelt taking about 20-something% and Taft taking about 20-something%. And that doesn't matter because remember, it's winner take all. So every time Taft and Theodore are going after each other in the states, they are splitting the Republican vote. They make it so it's easy for the Democrat to pick up the just right over just the majority of the popular, or just more of the popular vote than anybody else in that state, and boom, they get all the electoral points. That's why, boom, we have a Democrat who hasn't won since like 1889 to 1932. This will be the only Democrat that is going to be the president of the United States. Why? Thank the third party. Thank the Blue Blues Party because they split the votes in each state during the presidential election. Boom! Every single time there's a third party candidate, they will end up taking away votes from one of the candidates that are closely related to them. That's what happens here. He wins in a landslide. One other thing that happened during this election, I told this before about, Teddy Roosevelt. Before he was about to give a speech, he gets shot. I was totally right. It's the glasses case in his speech. He takes the bullet. He survives. He gives a 90-minute speech after getting shot because he's Theodore Roosevelt. That's the election in 1912. Oh, yeah, here's the numbers for you. Wilson, he got, for the popular vote, 41%. He gets 435 electoral points. I showed you the map. It's just unbelievable. He just dominated. Roosevelt only gets 27% of the popular vote, and electoral points are 88. Taft gets 23% of the popular vote and 8 electoral points. And Eugene Debs might as well just stayed home. He got 6% of the popular vote, 0 electoral points. He was there just in spirit. But that's the election in 1912. Let's get into Wilson's presidency. Democrat, like one of the only Democrats we see for like 3 or 4 decades that wins the presidency. So he does a lot of things, and he's actually a pretty good progressive. Progressivism is looking out for workers. The progressivism is making it safer to work in the workplace, safer to live normal life. He did a whole lot. So let's go through some of these things. So the first one is the Clayton Act. Clayton Act. This exempted unions from antitrust laws and made it easier to strike. So basically, this was a labor-intensive law. It allowed for unions to have power to go on strike. What do strikes do? Well, it gives power to the people that are doing the strike. If you have a business that's mistreating some sort of group of workers, what can they do? They could quit. But what if you don't have a lot of job opportunities? What if that's not an option? What if the option is they want just to make the business better for people? Well, striking could help them out with that. This helped them out to do that. Let's talk about the Keating-Owen Act. This one you guys should like. The Keating-Owen Act. This outlawed child labor. Before this, children were dying in coal mines. Before this, children were dying with horrible lung diseases for working in horrible plants. Children were burning their hands off in different types of metal factories. This was bad news bears. Children were not living as a child. They were growing up as men when they were little kids. Same thing with women. Women were put in these horrible positions. They were working as Hey, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, there was young girls that worked there too. So this limited child labor, or this made child labor laws so that it protected children in the workplace. By the way, you are affected by this right now. One of the few jobs you can get at your age, detasseling. And you're like, that's like the most brutal job in the world. It's pretty brutal. But there's limits to how long they can work you. And when you get a job when you're 14, 15, 16, there are limits to how long they can work you, how late they can work you. And this stems between Wilson's, laws that he passed. The next one is going to be the Adamson Act. And what this is it establishes the 8-hour workday just for railroad workers. But the 8-hour workday eventually turns into what we all use, 8-hour workday. Like that's the average. And this is why the 8-hour workday is what it is. We have 24 hours in a day. The thought was 8 hours of work, 8 hours of rest, 8 hours of family and recreation, or just living. And doing that that's why they established the 8-hour workday. This comes out of progressive era. This comes out of Woodrow Wilson's administration. He is definitely a progressive with all these different things that deals with work and safety in the workplace and workers' rights. He is a progressive through and through. And we'll talk about more about Woodrow Wilson after Thanksgiving break. Why? Because we're going to get into World War I. But those are the three presidents that you need to know of. You got to know about Theodore Roosevelt and all the laws he passed, Food and Drug Act, the Meat Inspection Act. You need to know about Taft and all the stuff that he did about antitrust. You need to know about Woodrow Wilson, all the working regulations he put in there to make it safer for people working. You need to know. And one thing you should need to know about this lesson, third parties typically ruin it for one of the other parties. And I'm a third party person. I like it's not the way our electoral system works. It's really hard for a third party. I hesitate to say impossible, but it's really difficult because they have to win the majority in states because it's winner take all, except for two. Remember, there's only 2 states it's not winner take all: Maine and Nebraska. That's it. All right, guys, take care. Peace out.